Oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good morning, Profesor Davison.
Good morning.
Selamat pagi, Pak Mujahidin, Bapak,
Selamat
Ibu,
pagi.
dan teman-teman sekalian. Welcome to the third Information System Research Methodology Workshop Series. Today's topic is about quantitative versus qualitative methods, types, and how we choose the right method for an information system research. This topic will be presented by Professor Robert Davison from City University of Hong Kong. Welcome, Professor Davison.
Thank you.
First, we would like to apologize that today's moderator, Dr. Tony, will not be able to join us because he have job outside the city, and then his flight this morning get delayed. So maybe he won't be able to make it in time to this workshop. So I will be the moderator for today's session. Let me introduce myself. My name is Raras Maya, and I am a lecturer of the Department of Information System ITS. In this workshop, I will use two languages, Indonesia and English. And like the previous workshop, we will have about 5 minutes break every 1 hour or so if it feels convenient to Professor Davison. And before we start this workshop, maybe Pak Mujahidin, as the head of the Department of Information System ITS, will give some short speech. Silahkan Pak Muja.
Belum sempat ganti background, Rek. Nggak apa-apa ya.
Mau apa-apa, Pak.
Ya, terima kasih. Good morning, Prof. Davison.
Morning.
Good morning. I'm very happy and give my appreciation. You can join again and share knowledge about the qualitative and quantitative methods for information system research in this workshop. Assalamualaikum juga kepada Bapak Ibu semua. Saya ucapkan selamat datang ya, dan ucapan terima kasih pada semua hadirin yang bisa ikut pada acara online workshop pada pagi hari ini yang diselenggarakan oleh Prodi Pasca Departemen Sistem Informasi. Saya juga ucapkan terima kasih kepada Pak Tony, Bu Raras, ini juga ada Bu Mahendra ya, serta Bapak Ibu dari Pasca Departemen Sistem Informasi yang lain. Hopefully this workshop can provide benefit to us and encourage us to more effective in research. And then I wish all participants enjoy in this workshop, and I apologize if there are still things that not good. Saya kira itu aja. Thank you for revision. May you always be healthy and keep enthusiastic ya about sharing to our department. Oke, terima kasih.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davison.
Raras Maya is muted again.
Okay, thank you for the speech, Pak Mujahidin.
Yeah.
Okay, I will make some sort of conclusion about the previous workshop. In the first workshop 2 weeks ago, we invited Professor Caroline Chan to discuss about how to convert any projects or social works into journal paper. From this session, we learned that anything can be a material for writing journal paper, as long as we can highlight the impact or the contribution of our research. And then in the second workshop last week, Professor Robert Davison discussed about research philosophy and its influence on research approach. Actually, in this workshop, I got so many knowledge. And I conclude that everybody have a research philosophy that he believes. And although this research philosophy is personal, it will influence our approach in doing research. Therefore, we need to understand our research philosophy and be able to apply it appropriately to the research that we do. And another point that I think is important is the purpose of research is not just to fill some knowledge gaps, but to provide solution to a real world problems. And this will drive our research question. So in this third session, we will discuss about research methodology. Ya, saya switch pakai bahasa Indonesia ya Bapak Ibu. Ya, di sini saya hendak mengutip kata-kata Pak Tony, Dr. Tony, bahwa sistem informasi itu mengenai teknologi in use. Bagaimana teknologi dapat dimanfaatkan oleh masyarakat dan kelompok sosial sehingga memberikan dampak positif dalam kehidupan mereka. kebanyakan dari kita menganggap bahwa untuk mencapai tujuan tadi, maka di dalam riset sistem informasi kita harus membuat aplikasi. Kalau ada mahasiswa mengerjakan tugas akhir dan membuat model, biasanya kita akan tanya, loh aplikasinya mana? Kok cuma model gitu. Nah, yang seperti ini menganut metode penelitian kuantitatif. Spesifiknya adalah the science research. Termasuk saya juga begitu sih. Nah, padahal model pun bisa menjadi output riset di bidang sistem informasi selama tujuannya tadi tercapai, yaitu menyelesaikan masalah secara lebih efektif, lebih efisien daripada metode atau tools sebelumnya. Di sistem informasi itu masih ada banyak metode-metode penelitian yang lain, seperti kualitatif dan mixed method. Nah, di sesi yang ketiga ini, kita akan membahas tentang apa saja metode riset di sistem informasi dan bagaimana memilih metode yang tepat untuk penelitian kita. Dan karena tujuan kita di sini adalah untuk berdiskusi, untuk menambah ilmu baru, maka kami persilahkan kepada Bapak Ibu, if you want to ask any question, please write it on the Zoom or YouTube chat, and then we will convey it to the Professor Davison. And right now we have about 23 participants in the Zoom and about 17 participants in the YouTube streaming. So we have about 40 participants in total for this workshop session right now. Ya, terima kasih banyak atas kehadirannya ya Bapak Ibu. So I would like to start this workshop session. I would like to make a brief introduction about Professor Davison. Okay. Professor Robert Davison is a professor in the Department of Information System. He teaches global information system, knowledge management, and qualitative research method at the postgraduate level. His research focus in the virtual knowledge management initiative in Chinese organization, and his affiliation is City University of Hong Kong. He is the editor-in-chief in Information System Journal since 2012. And then he also editor-in-chief in Electronic Journal of Information System in Developing Countries from 2001. This is the very brief introduction about Professor Davison. And then I would like to invite Professor Davison to start his presentation.
Thank you very much. Let me share my
Oh,
slide.
yes, okay.
Oh,
Wait,
you disabled me.
Yes.
You disabled me.
I will make you co-host first.
Okay.
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 Please welcome
Try
Professor Davison.
Hold on, let's have a look. This one. Okay, good. Thank you very much for the introduction and also for the summary of what we learned about last week. When I was listening to your summary and you explained how you'd learned things, you'd gained some knowledge from the last couple of sessions, and I thought to myself, it's not quite that easy. You can listen, you can understand, you can think, yeah, that makes sense. But to me, that's not really knowledge. That's information. Knowledge involves making it personal. And to make it personal, you actually have to try it. You have to have the experience of doing it. And so you're right, everybody has their own research philosophy, even if they're not conscious about it. Everybody can apply that to doing research, and maybe therefore everyone will do research in a slightly different way. But today I'm going to be looking at methods, and I don't think it's enough just to tell you about methods. You can understand what I'm talking about. You can agree with me or disagree with me. But you also have to practice using those methods by yourself. Because when you do that, you're going to find all sorts of difficult situations. It won't be quite as easy as I explain. Because in my introduction to methods, I can only tell you the principles of how it should be done. But I can't tell you what will you experience when you actually do it. Well, I can tell you a bit what might happen, but I can't anticipate all of the problems, all of the difficulties. But there are many difficulties in research, and we have to overcome them. And we can only overcome them by trying. We might ask for help, but in the end, we as the researchers have that responsibility to try and achieve the right outcomes. And if there are bumps, if there are hurdles, if there are barriers, we have to find ways to get around that. So today I'm looking at methods, qualitative or quantitative, and how to choose the right method. So let me start off with a slide of misconceptions, because I think the title I was given is slightly misleading. And I will explain why. I want to ask you, is it the method that is qualitative or quantitative, or is it the data that is qualitative or quantitative?
The data.
I think it's the data. I don't think it's the method. Now, it may be that some methods mostly use qualitative data or quantitative data. That's okay. But still, it's the data that's qualitative or quantitative, not the method. That's the first misconception. So if I go back one slide about methods, well, it's not really qualitative or quantitative method, it's data. And yes, case studies, for example, are very often associated with qualitative data, but not only. You can also have quantitative. Surveys are often associated with quantitative data, but not only. Surveys can also have open-ended questions. It's quite common in a survey that the very last question is something like, is there anything else you want to tell me? Are there any other questions we didn't ask which are important? And then the respondents can type their answers. That's going to be qualitative. Now, also here, there's the issue of which method applies in which situation. And my view is that it's very unusual for only one method to be possible and every other method is wrong. It's more likely that we could use different methods in the same situation. And different methods would enable us to study different parts of the situation, understand it in different ways, collect different kinds of data, and even reach rather different conclusions. So we might choose a survey of 400 people, or we might choose to do a case study and interview 20 people. The questions we ask, the answers we get could be quite different. But I don't think one method is better than the other method. It's just different, and it will enable us to understand something differently. So those are implications of using different methods. We may do different things, and we may actually ask different questions and reach different answers. Some people talk about mixed methods, where they perhaps do a case study first and they do a survey second. That's okay, it's quite popular. But it might mean we also have to mix the epistemology, that maybe the first study is interpretive and the second study is positivist. This is referring back to last week. And then you have to be careful, because if you mix them too much, you may find that they're not compatible. But we'll come back. So before I look at method, I want to look at some big picture things. So the purpose of this is really to give you a sense of what do I do when I'm doing a new research project. So the first thing I do is I think about the big picture. What is the big topic that I'm investigating? What do I want to learn? And who is interested to read about what I'm doing? Who wants to read the paper? These are really important questions for me, because if I don't know what I'm trying to do and I don't know who's interested, maybe I should not start. Maybe I should go and get answers to those questions first. It may be that the research is driven by a problem which I've identified, maybe in a company, maybe in society. And so it's problem-driven research. Alternatively, it might be that I'm curious about something. And I think that topic sounds really interesting, but I still have to create a problem. But it's the curiosity that starts the process. And then I have to look for a context where I can actually do a study to satisfy my curiosity. I suppose that a third type of starting point is a gap in the literature. But I have to say very honestly, I am not a big fan of gaps. I think dentists are interested in gaps because of teeth. And I think librarians are interested in gaps because they like books to be lined up on the shelf. But for me, gaps in the literature are not very interesting. Gaps in knowledge are more interesting. Research gaps, I think, are more interesting. And it could be that there's a gap that is the starting point. But even then, I still have to think, who is interested in the gap? Or who is interested in filling the gap? And how will filling the gap add to my knowledge or add to other people's knowledge? Why is it useful? So these are the kind of big questions which I'm going to ask myself at the beginning of a project, and it will take some time. I can't just answer in 5 minutes. I may need a few days or a week or a couple of weeks to think about these things, and maybe to talk to other people to get their feedback. And only after that, I can start thinking about a research question. Now, for myself, I always try to find a problem. I prefer problem-based research. You don't have to, but that's my preference. And I hope that this problem will be significant and useful for some stakeholders. And I want to identify who the stakeholders are. And the stakeholders should not just be academics, but I want them to be, quote, real people who can appreciate the outcomes of the research. Those people might be in the organization, or they might be in teams, or they might be individuals, they might be in one country or many countries, doesn't matter, but there should be some kind of stakeholder for me. And then when I've got that problem identified and stakeholders, I start thinking about research questions. And it might be a why is something like this, or how do people do things, or what is an effective way of working? But there needs to be a research question. I say this because quite often when I read articles which are submitted to journals, I cannot find a research problem and I cannot find a research question. What I find is we were able to find some data, so we've analyzed it. Isn't that interesting? But there's no reason to analyze the data. There's no purpose behind it. Nothing. It's just we had the opportunity, so here we are. And I find that a bit sad. I think it's very important to problematize the research topic, meaning to create or to identify a problem that's inside the area you're interested in. If there's no problem to solve, it's very hard to make a contribution. And then it's very hard to find an audience of stakeholders who are interested. And if you can't do those things, then publishing your paper gets much more difficult. Because the editor is going to say, well, why? Why did you do this? Who cares about this? Who is interested in this? Why do you think the readers of this journal will be interested? And perhaps you don't have a good answer. And you don't have a good answer because you never thought about that. You only thought, well, good, I can get some data. I can play with it. I can run some statistics. But who cares? So these, again, are very fundamental issues. When I look at organizations, I see lots of tensions. And here, tensions means disagreements, misunderstandings, difference of opinion, different ideas about how to do things or what's a good way of doing things. Sometimes that creates anger. Sometimes it creates frustration. Sometimes people resign. They just go away. Sometimes people decide to damage the organization. They hate the organization so much, they try to hurt it. And these tensions happen very often between management level and employee level, senior to junior. They also happen when people need to use a technology that doesn't fit the task, where the task technology fit is not very good. They can work in situations, so they can exist in situations where people don't like the technology in general. They also happen when there are differences between the cultural values of people. Now, in a single country, that's possible, but less likely. In a big country, I think it's more likely. In China, I do see cross-cultural differences between, let's say, the north of China and the south of China. There's quite a big difference, or between the cities and the countryside. I would suspect in Indonesia, there will be some cultural differences, which you would know about. I would not, but I'm sure you would. But if you're working across different countries, then the cross-cultural differences can be more apparent and can create some quite difficult situations. I recall a situation of a study looking at software development, and they had teams of software developers. Half the people were in America, half the people were in Norway. Now, Norway, as a Western European country, has a culture that is not so different. But one problem was language. The Americans, of course, would use English, and they would type or speak very fast. And sometimes the Norwegians felt a little bit patronized. They felt being looked down on. They felt unrespected. And so they would switch into Norwegian. Of course, the Americans don't understand any Norwegian at all. And the Norwegians are much happier using their first language, not a second language. So maybe I should add to my list of tensions cross-language differences, where different people involved use different languages and prefer to use different languages. That can certainly create tension. And when that happens, the situation may get quite difficult to investigate. I need to leave you for 1 minute because a giant bee has just flown into my house, so I have to help it go away.
Oke, Bapak Ibu, kalau ada pertanyaan bisa dituliskan di chat Zoom atau YouTube. Nanti akan saya sampaikan.
Sepertinya lebih sedikit dari yang kemarin ya, Bu.
Apanya, Bu?
Okay, I'm coming back. He has gone. So you also have to ask who cares about the research. I hope you do, but does anyone else care? Who wants to read the paper? What could they learn? These kind of things. And then which journal is going to find it interesting? If no one cares about the research, then why are you doing it? Why are you spending time on something that nobody wants and no one cares about and you probably can't publish? So please think about this one as well. Now, let's assume I've answered all those questions and I've satisfied myself that I do have a topic, I do have an audience of people who are interested, I do have a journal that might be interested to accept the paper. Now I start thinking about literature and theory. I might do a pilot study. I probably need to scan the literature to see what have other people done, and also to look at which methods they used. Do I want to just follow them and do the same method? Or do I want to do a different method? Am I the first person to do this research? Or maybe I'm following other people. And so you need to think about this too. Maybe other people have done research, but they've all done surveys. And so that's an opportunity for you to do a different method. If you want to use a survey as well, how is your study going to be different from the studies that were done previously? So there needs to be an answer to those kinds of questions. In terms of literature, there's always too much. There's no way to read it all. And I say this to PhD students in particular, you cannot read all the literature. It's impossible. You spend your whole life and you'll never finish. You need to focus on recent literature. And by recent, I normally mean the last 5 years. You need to demonstrate that what you're doing is adding to knowledge. It's not just repeating what someone else has already done. It's not just ignoring what other people have done. You must be familiar with research, because when you submit your article, the reviewers who look at it are likely to be experts. They are likely to know the literature. And if they think that you've missed things out, that will be a problem. I mean, they can just tell you, go and read the literature, but then you're wasting time. So you need to be familiar with the literature at the beginning. And you need to be sure that what you're doing is not simply repeating what other people have done. Maybe what you're doing is new. Maybe what you're doing is really special. But are you sure? Are you confident about this? One way to be confident is to be familiar with the literature. And when you read the literature, of course, you will identify who are the key researchers in this area. And maybe you want to go and look at the homepage or the Google Scholar page for those key researchers, and you just check, have they done anything else which I've missed? Because you don't want to miss them out. It's quite possible that those key researchers in that area will also be your reviewers. And if they are your reviewers and you missed out some of their papers, well, you can guess how they will feel. Maybe they will be kind and they will just suggest you go and read some more. Or maybe they will be less kind and feel insulted. Who knows? The other part of literature is methods. Because when you read the studies of other people, you need to be sensitive to the methods they used. You can also look at their justifications for the methods they used. And that's helpful, because if you see how they justified, then that may help you to justify your own selection of methods. Now, I say this because I often see papers where the authors don't actually tell me why they use a survey or why they use case research. They just do it with no explanation. And it may be they forgot, it may be they think it's not important, but as an editor, I like to know why you do what you do. Why you pick this question, why you pick this topic, and why you pick this method. Because I need to understand how you're thinking. I need to understand your research process. So providing a little bit more information about what you did is very useful. Of course, for any study, there may be a number of literatures. And if there are too many, you're probably writing a PhD thesis. You're not writing a journal article. This morning at the ISJ, I rejected an article. The senior editor and the associate editor both said it should be rejected. This was a first round revision, so it's been revised once, and we rejected the second version. And a key reason for rejection was that the author is trying to do too much. There are too many literatures, and there's no synthesis. The author is very good at describing things, but not at analyzing things. There's no integration of literature. So I'd say doing a good literature review relates to research methods, the method of literature review. And it needs to have a synthesis. It needs to have a way to identify the key points across different topics and bring them together in a systematic way. In this way, you can demonstrate not only that you've read it, but you've also understood it and you've thought about it. You've thought about how that literature is relevant to what you're doing. And you can demonstrate to the reader why it's appropriate to bring together these different literatures. So, of course, this means you actually have to read the articles. What it also implies is that if you cite people, but you don't actually read their articles, you might make mistakes. And I think this is a problem which all of us are affected by, including me. When I read an article, of course, I see there are references, and maybe I want to cite those references. Do I go and read them, or do I just trust the author who has cited them? Most likely it's the second one, because we don't have time to read everything. So we trust other people, but there's a huge amount of trust here. I trust the author, and the author didn't read the article either. The author was trusting someone else who also didn't read the article, who was trusting someone else. So it might be 7, 8, 10, 20 authors ago that someone actually read the article, which is being cited by this huge chain of people. So for PhD students in particular, I think you need to read what you cite, because an external examiner can say, I see that you're citing Davison 2020. Have you read that article? And if the answer is no, then it may be that you're misusing the research, you're misusing the literature, you're not citing it correctly. And you don't know that you're not citing correctly because you haven't actually read it. Theory, we have to look at carefully. Theory often relates to method, because we will test theories or we will build theories using methods. Theory tends to inform the research design. It tells us what kind of things we should be looking at. It also helps us to make sense of results. The research we do may confirm the theory. Yes, the theory is supported by our data. It may disconfirm because our data does not match the theory. Or maybe we can make the theory bigger or more advanced in some respect. But the theory needs to learn from what we do. Think about the theory as a person, the theory as a living person, a living entity. And the theory needs to benefit from the research we do in some way. Being confirmed is a benefit. Being disconfirmed is also a benefit. Being extended or being narrowed or widened or made more deep, whatever change you make, adding in new moderators, these all help to improve the theory. And future researchers will do the same thing. So we need to look at the theory carefully and see how we can learn from it, but also contribute to it. I'd like to ask if there are any questions at this stage. I see no one has typed anything, but if anybody wants to type something about what I've talked about so far, please can you ask now?
Actually, there's a question from YouTube chat from Bu Fitro, Mrs. Fitro from UIN Jakarta, but maybe it's not related in this section, but I will ask it anyway.
Okay.
You want to research about modeling an approach in implementing an IS strategy. What methods are appropriate for an IS strategy alignment model or model alignment?
Yeah, it's not quite related. If you want to do strategic alignment, to me, that's almost certainly an organization level research. You'll need to talk to people in the IT side of the organization as well as the general CEO side. So I would suggest probably qualitative data and probably a case study to get enough rich details in order to demonstrate if there is alignment or not.
Okay.
I see Anna has asked a question. Does contributor theory means we need to add or remove construct on the original theory, e.g. TAM? I strongly advise that you never use TAM. There are probably at least 10,000 papers on TAM. It is just about impossible to make any contribution to TAM, whether you add or take away. No journal will accept this. TAM is too old and too simple. TAM 2 is the same, TAM 3 is the same, UTAUT, UTAUT2, they all have the same problems. They're too simple, they're too general, and they tell us nothing about the local context. So contributor theory means, yes, you could look at an existing theory, but I suggest not TAM or something similar. And you could see how you could modify the theory, usually by adding, not by taking away, something which helps to explain better. That's one way. Some people like to build new research models, and they take little bits from here and little bits from there, and they create something hybrid. That's possible. And all the little bits add up together, and you have to think very carefully about the logic of the model and demonstrate that those concepts are really related to each other. I did this myself recently. I created a new research model with 9 constructs, and only 2 of my hypotheses were supported. Everything else was rejected. It's quite frustrating. So clearly I made mistakes in terms of the logic that was connecting the different constructs together. So I'd say I was contributing, but unfortunately, because 7 of my hypotheses were rejected, the contribution was not confirmed. Amna, does that make sense?
Actually, I want to ask, when you make a research that almost all of the hypotheses are rejected, do you continue the research, or you recreate the research with different hypotheses, or maybe
Okay.
just stop it?
Well, one thing is to change the alignment of the hypotheses. So I create new hypotheses by connecting different constructs together and seeing if I have better argument. Another way is you have to drop some of them and see if that helps. Another way is you have to look at the instrumentation, and you look, do the research instrument questions really measure what the construct says, or have I missed something? How many constructs for mid-range theory? I would suggest probably 4 to 6 at least. If you have independent and you have mediating and you have dependent and 1 or 2 moderators, then I would think 4 to 6 is probably about right. But I don't really want to give you a number, because it depends on the topic, it depends on what you want to study. And I mean, if you have 20, that's going to be a problem, because it'll be very, very hard to get the logic to work. What I see PhD students doing, if they want a lot, they tend to break it into separate studies. So study 1 has 5, study 2 has 5, study 3 has 5, and they can show the relations between them, but they're not testing them all at the same time. There are also going to be problems of common method bias and so on, which I don't want to get into, particularly for cross-sectional studies. Does anybody else have questions?
Okay, thank you. I think that's enough, Professor.
Enough for now? Okay,
Yes.
let me go on then. So theory, for me, and I really agree with Carl Weick, a good theory should be plausible, it should make sense, and it should be correspondent with reality. The theory has to fit reality in some way. You can demonstrate this theory fits into what I'm doing, what I'm studying. And then Lynham, the purpose of theory is to describe and explain how things actually work. So those are 2 useful ideas about what theory is, what the purpose of theory is. Joya and Pittri, it offers a coherent description, explanation, representation of observed or experienced phenomena. So the observed and experienced phenomena are very close to what Carl Weick calls the presumed realities. Something you can see or something you can experience. And finally, Donald Hambrick, a theory helps us to organize our thoughts, generate coherent explanations, improve our predictions. That's also useful as a purpose of theory. So for me, a theory is a way to make sense of the world, or to make sense of some small part of the world. It helps me to make sense of things. And I would suggest that that's a useful way of thinking about theory. How does theory help us to make sense of things? If it doesn't, then it's not very good, or it's not working as a theory. Something's missing. Now, when I've gone through all these stages of problems and motivations and literature and theory, I'm coming to my research process. Now I'm going to start thinking about method. So the last 12 slides, I didn't talk about method very much. And the reason was because I think we have to do things before we talk about method. We need to prepare the ground. We can't just jump in with a method without really understanding the situation, the problem, the literature, the opportunity perhaps. What have other people done? What could I do? When you come to the method, I think there are going to be at least two key considerations. One is which method is going to be appropriate to help you answer your research question. The other one is, which method do I know how to use? And the second one can be a problem, because if you only understand one method, you only know how to use one method, then you can only answer a very limited number of questions in each problem situation. If you are familiar with different methods, then it's easier to try different ways of doing things. So survey research is probably the most common research in information systems. My guess is 65–70% of IS research involves surveys these days. And many researchers, including most of my colleagues and most of my students, would use a survey without justifying it, without explaining why, probably without even realizing there's a need to explain why. They just do it. And reviewers who do the same things themselves won't question that. Reviewers will think, survey, of course, that's normal. Everyone does surveys, so one more survey, that's no problem. Case studies are a much smaller group of people and are practiced less frequently. Experiments used to be more popular, and I think in some journals they still are, but I don't see experiments very often. They tend not to be submitted to ISJ. Perhaps they go to other journals. Action research is rare. I do it myself. I can publish it, but I don't see very much. I was recently doing a survey of action research. So I say survey, it's not really a survey. I was doing a review of action research papers in information systems journals. And I looked at 13 top IS journals. And over a 35-year period, I could only find 136 action research articles. But in the same time period, there were more than 10,000 articles published in those journals. So 136 out of 10,000, it's 1%. Action research doesn't see very much. Ethnography is the same, probably even less. So the methods are there, they're well documented, people know how to do them, but very, very few people use these methods. It means that they don't ask the questions which could use those methods. And then perhaps it means that that kind of knowledge is simply not created. The knowledge which you could obtain from those methods is not done. Most of the knowledge we get is knowledge from surveys. When you've got a method, you need to think about data. Where's the data going to come from? Is it from interviews or observations or survey data or questionnaire or something else? You need to think, who is going to provide the data? Which people are going to provide the data? Do I have access to the people? Because if you can't collect the data, then you can't do the research. So that may also be a constraint. And of course, eventually you will have to analyze the data. And you have to have the skills for that kind of analysis. I see 2 questions. Theory must be nodes with arrows? No, not at all. Definitely not. If you want boxes and arrows, you can have them, but you don't have to. You can describe a theory in words with no diagrams. I want to ask a question, how to make sharp research questions about our chosen theory. I mean, sometimes we already understand about the theory, but our research question is less sharp or less different from existing research. I guess by sharp, you mean focused. I think you need to ask the research question first, and then think about the theory second. But the way you write the question, it seems to be the other way around. It seems that you're looking at the theory first and then thinking about questions. And to me, that's illogical. I can't understand why you would want to do that. It seems to me that you should look for research problems and then create research questions. And then you think about which theory might fit the question. That's how I feel about that question from you.
Thank you, Professor. There is also 2 questions from the YouTube chat about the data.
Go ahead.
First is from Mrs. Rinda Hesti. For quantitative research, how much is the minimum number of respondents that can be taken? And how can we make a good questionnaire so that respondent can fill it in properly?
Okay, let me answer this one first. The number of respondents depends on the number of constructs in the model. If you have a relatively simple model, you can probably have less data. If you have a very complex model, you're going to have to collect more data from more people. I don't have a magic number, but I would suggest that it's very unusual to see a survey paper with less than 150 or 200 responses. It depends which method you use. Are you using factor analysis? Are you using chi-squared? Are you using PLS and structural equation modeling? Different techniques will require different amounts of data. In terms of how you design the questionnaire so that the people can understand it and answer questions correctly, it's obviously a very practical question. I think that part of the answer is you can't just do it yourself. You need to create the questions and then you need to do a pilot test. And you show the questions to some other similar people, similar to the ones who will provide the data. And you ask them to look at the questions and see if it makes sense. You can try to see if the questions actually do fit in the constructs you want them to fit to. There's a process called card sorting. I'm not going to explain it now. You can search for card sorting. But basically, you create many paper cards and you write onto each card a description of something related to the construct. And then you give those cards to other people and see if they agree they belong together or not. But if you get feedback on your questions, then you can improve the way the question is written to make sure it really means what you want it to mean. What's the second YouTube question?
Okay, thank you for the useful information. The second question is from Mrs. Fitroh from UIN Jakarta. Can data be obtained from the journal papers in previous research?
Sorry, can data be obtained from?
The journal papers in previous research.
I don't understand.
So there is a journal paper that maybe in the journal paper there is some data set. And then can we use that for our research? The data set in the previous literature.
Okay, so it's like secondary data.
Yes.
Well, first you will have to get the permission of the person who collected the data to reuse their data.
Yes.
That's essential. Otherwise, you're going to be plagiarizing. In the journals I'm familiar with, this kind of data is summarized, but it's not provided in full. So I'm not sure if I would be able to access all of the data. If it was qualitative or quantitative, it's very hard to get the whole data set. But anyway, let's assume you can get it. You would need to demonstrate why it's better to use data collected by somebody else, not to collect your own data. That's the key issue. So I think it's possible, yes, but you will have to justify very carefully. Now, if it's your own data which you collected previously and now you want to do a second study with your own data, I think that's fine. But if the data is very old and you're reusing it 10 years later, that could be a problem. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Very clear.
No problem. Okay, good. So if we're collecting qualitative data, it might be interviews, it might be face-to-face, it might be on the phone, it might be social media. And we would have questions to push people to answer, to give us what we want. We might make observations, we might make notes by hand, we might draw pictures or take photographs. We might keep a diary. There are diary studies, and there are studies of other people who keep diaries and you analyze what they wrote. There can be corporate documents, websites, annual reports, brochures, all sorts of information that the organization produces. You can analyze that. You may be able to access data created by employees, data which may be emails or messages or blogs or something. So there's a variety of different kinds of qualitative data. You need to have an interview protocol. You need to have a plan for the interview. How are you going to run the interview? Which questions are you going to ask? How do you start? Do you start off with the most difficult question? Do you start off with a sensitive question? You start off with a question that's completely irrelevant, but it's good to break the ice. Do you ask questions where they have yes/no answers? Or do you ask questions where the person has to explain something more carefully? Do you want the question to be very formal? You ask the question, they give the answer. You ask the next question, they give the next answer. Or do you want to have a conversation and try and make it more natural? So those are issues to look at for an interview protocol. It may depend who you're talking to. If you're talking to junior employees, you may make it more structured, more formal, and easier for them to answer. If you're talking to a CEO, you probably can't do that. They'll get fed up. They'll ask you to go away. CEOs don't have too much time, but very often they do like to have conversations. But for them, the conversation is an opportunity to learn something, not just to answer your questions. So maybe they will tell you things that you're not interested in, but they want to share. And maybe you should be interested. Maybe they will tell you things you're not looking for or you're not expecting. That doesn't matter. You need to be open-minded so that you can pick up unexpected findings, serendipitous findings. I recall doing this when I interviewed the CIO of Hong Kong government. This guy is obviously very senior. He has lots of stories, lots of experiences. I'm interested in information privacy. So I asked him about information privacy, but then he told me all sorts of things I never asked. Some of them are confidential, I can't repeat them. Some of them are just gossip, and other things are actually very interesting. And then I can follow up and ask more details. So you need to think about which interview protocol, which style is going to fit better for the kind of questions you want to ask and the people you're talking to. Normally, you want to record the interview because you won't be able to write fast enough and you will forget what they say. At the same time, if you record it and you put the microphone in front of their face, they will feel very uncomfortable. So probably it's better to use your phone and put it on the table and it's recording, but slowly the phone will disappear. They won't notice it and they will talk naturally, but the phone will record everything. And then after the interview, you can go and transcribe what you recorded. In my experience, if you do this by hand, if you listen to the recording and you type what they said, you need 8 hours to type 1 hour of recording. It's a very slow process. You have to go back and check and listen carefully, especially if the recording quality is not good. If you have software, you can do it faster, but you still have to check the software accuracy, because if the software makes mistakes and you don't notice, that will be a problem. Amna asks how to avoid spurious correlations in case study. I don't know. You need to have a good explanation for things. If one person says something, that may not be enough evidence. If many people are saying the same thing, then the chance of everybody being spurious is quite low. So having more volume. On this slide, number 16, I'm showing you some information about a company I visited in Beijing. This is a public relations company. And when I got to their office, I found that it was, the architecture was a little unusual. You open the door and you see this enormous room. And then you see the walls and lots of people, but there are no individual offices. There's no privacy. Even the CEO has no office. And so I want to draw this. I had paper with me and I simply draw on paper the layout of the office. Where are the tables? Where are the people? Where is the coffee room, etc. I looked at how people were walking around. And when I walked into the room and talked to them and listened to them, I could see how they were working in this open style office. I asked the CEO, why you designed the office like this? Do people like this? And he said, well, the ones who like it, they stay, and the ones who don't like it, they resign. They can't cope. But the reason he did it is he wants to have an open culture. He doesn't want people to be locked in offices as individuals or groups. He wants to break things up. So nobody is allowed to reserve anywhere to sit. When you arrive in the office, you find a chair, you sit down, you start working. But on your table, there could be other people from other teams. That's okay. You can walk around the office, you can go and meet people, but you can't reserve a seat. In fact, the CEO also does not reserve a seat for himself. He sits at a different table every day of the week because he wants to meet his employees. He wants to work with them and learn from them. He wants to be very hands-on. And people who like that, they love the company. And people who don't like it, they don't stay, they go. But certainly looking at this gave me some ideas about the office culture. And I'd say that's data. It's qualitative data, and I can use that data when I write up my paper to describe the context of the office. In another situation, I was doing a research in a hotel chain. I talked to the CEO about how employees use information systems for communication and knowledge sharing and problem solving and so on. And so I'm going to start off with very gentle conversation questions. See if we have some common interests. See if we have common topics before I get to the important questions. And I'm expecting that maybe half of what he says is not very useful. But that's okay. I don't mind spending time to have a conversation, to build a relationship, because then later he will answer my important questions and I will learn what I want to know. But talking to the staff at the check-in is not the same conversation. The check-in staff don't have time for conversation. They're too busy. In fact, when I interview them, they have to stop talking to me very frequently because they have to attend to the customers who are checking in or checking out who've got problems. So it's a very fractured interview, but the interview was at the check-in desk in person, in their office, in their normal working location. So I'm asking questions about what they do, problems they have, how they use IT, how they share good ideas, these kind of things. And most of their answers are very direct. There's very little chat. It's mostly very functional. Here's another example. One of my students was VP for human resources in global logistics firm. And she introduced me to her boss, executive vice president for China. And he told me the company customers are not happy because they think that the staff and the employees don't have good knowledge about what's going on. And he asked me to help. Can I explore the real problem and can I actually make some recommended changes? Now, exploring a situation could be a case study. Recommending changes is not a case study. That has to be action research. Or maybe consulting. So I'm going to need to interview people. Probably quite a lot of people. Because I don't really know why there is a problem. The problem may be about different employees in different locations in the company, or the problem may be about the systems and the data inside the systems. So a project like this can take a long time. And as it turns out, we spent 6 months talking to people in, I think, 5 different locations. Maybe 4, but it was a lot of people in different places. We had to talk to managers, we talked to junior managers, we talked to frontline staff, we talked to people who on telephone hotline, we talked to people who work at the airports, we talked to people who are working with customs officers, we talked to people in sales and marketing. So a lot of different people to talk to in order to explore before I can start thinking about changes. The practical contribution is helping them solve their problem. The academic contribution relates to knowledge management, and it relates actually to action research as well, because we use action research in this study. And through the action research and through qualitative data analysis, we were in a position to propose new theoretical ideas about knowledge sharing. That work is still in progress. The first paper was published in 2018. Still have another paper we're working on looking at the theory, how we can build theory out of that study. So when I go into the field, when I go into an organization, I often find that I have the opportunity to meet interesting people, to see interesting things, phenomena, and to have interesting conversations. And those conversations are really critical. They are the most interesting things. I want to talk to people. I want to try and understand their world, understand the problems they face, understand the solutions they create. And it's quite likely that those conversations will lead me to future research projects. So just now I was talking about the global logistics firm, and we did study them for 2 years in the end, and we proposed solutions. They implemented the solutions were successful, they were very happy. And then they said, well, that was great. We're so happy that we were successful. Now, what about the second project? And what about the third project? Can you stay with us and help us with the next one? So if I put a lot of effort into the first study and I have a good relationship with the key people, there's a very high chance that they will invite me to come to the second study and to work with them again. It's good for them because they know me, they trust me. It's good for me because they will help me collect data. They will help me to do more research that I can publish. So it's a win-win. So I try to look at these interviews, these conversations. I look at them as an opportunity to learn, but also to create the future, the research future. And to do that, I have to be very open-minded to the possibility that they're going to say something that I should follow up. I can't predict what they're going to say. I can't be certain about anything, except it should be an interesting conversation. And so I invite you, when you do research, to try and have interesting conversations. Talk to people, listen to them, encourage them to talk more. Because in this way, you may be able to create the opportunity for more research projects in the future that will be of great value to you. Of course, you need to keep notes, you need to document them, you need to see what's going on. But most of all, you have to be prepared for unexpected things to happen. There are various corporate documents that you can look at. Strategic plans are probably on the internet. Business processes may be a bit harder to identify unless they have a manual and they're willing to show you. Templates they might have, training manuals they should have. Even internal telephone books can be quite interesting. So much information about companies is on the internet, but it may not only be the corporate website. You may also find documents on consulting websites. There may be consulting reports or white paper or documentaries which you can access. I suggest you look at those documents carefully before you go to the interview so that you're prepared. If you read those documents, if you look at the website, if you look at the organization structure, then you're doing your homework and it will help you to prepare better so that when you do have the interview, you ask the right questions. And to me, the right questions are the questions which you don't have the answers to already. Maybe some things you can find out from the internet, so you don't need to ask or not ask directly. There are other things maybe you cannot find out, and then you need to go and ask. So when I went to the hotel chain to do interviews, I was waiting for my appointment. I was a bit early. Normally, I would arrive 10 to 15 minutes early. As a matter of principle, I think it's good to arrive early. There were some company documents on the table for visitors, so I'll read them. So I understand that the company that manages the hotel also manages projects for engineering around the world. I didn't know that. That's interesting. That will be something to talk about later. There are some posters on the wall. There are some award certificates on the wall, naming projects, naming people. I should write down the details, or I should take photographs of them. And the things on the table, maybe I'll even put them in my bag and take them back to study later. But when I talk to the CEO, I want to show that I know something about the company. And all this information which they're providing for free, well, I want to ask about it. It will help me to understand the company better. I know it's a little bit early, but I think I'm going to suggest we take a short break at this point.
Oh, that's okay. That's not a bit early.
Is that all right?
Audience, we will have a short break about 5 minutes. It's okay.
5-10 minutes, something like
Yeah,
that.
okay.
Yeah, sure.
5
No
until
problem.
10 minutes.
Thank you. I'm going to mute myself and turn off my video just for the moment.
Okay, we will back about 10 past, maybe 17. Thank you.
Seiring dengan berkembangnya teknologi informasi, diperlukan pengetahuan mengenai bagaimana cara mengelola teknologi informasi yang sesuai dengan kebutuhan dan proses bisnis dari suatu perusahaan. Sebagai salah satu institusi terbaik di Indonesia, ITS memberikan sumbangsih dengan mendirikan sebuah departemen yang bernama Sistem Informasi yang sejalan dengan kebutuhan tersebut. Departemen Sistem Informasi didirikan pada tanggal 14 Juni 2001 atas dukungan dari Presiden keempat Republik Indonesia, Bapak Abdurrahman Wahid. Pada pidato beliau di saat Disnatalis ITS yang ke-40 yang menyarankan ITS untuk membuat sebuah fakultas yang selaras dengan perkembangan teknologi informasi. Mahasiswa sistem informasi dibina agar pada saat lulus mereka mempunyai kemampuan sebagai individu yang mampu berkontribusi di bidang sistem informasi. Profil lulusan Departemen Sistem Informasi adalah perekayasa data dan informasi, analis sistem, manajer proyek IT, manajer informasi bisnis, analis bisnis, dan perintis bisnis IT. Saat ini, Departemen Sistem Informasi telah mendapatkan akreditasi A untuk program studi sarjana dan B untuk program studi pasca sarjana dari Badan Akreditasi Nasional Perguruan Tinggi atau BAN-PT. Selain itu, Departemen Sistem Informasi juga mendapatkan akreditasi internasional, yaitu Asian University Network Quality Assurance Standard. Sejak berdiri, Departemen Sistem Informasi sudah jauh berkembang dengan total mahasiswa mencapai 771 mahasiswa, memiliki 2 program studi sarjana dan pasca sarjana, memiliki 35 dosen dan 21 tenaga kependidikan. Itu Departemen Sistem Informasi juga membuka kelas sarjana internasional atau International Undergraduate Program yang dalam proses belajarnya menggunakan bahasa Inggris sebagai bahasa pengantar. Departemen Sistem Informasi memiliki 5 laboratorium penelitian yang terdiri dari Infrastruktur dan Keamanan Teknologi Informasi, IKTI, Akuisisi Data dan Diseminasi Informasi, ADDI, Manajemen Sistem Informasi, MSI, Rekayasa Data dan Inteligensi Bisnis, RDIB, dan Sistem Enterprise, SE. Sebagai sarana pendukung, Departemen Sistem Informasi menyediakan fasilitas yang bisa digunakan untuk mahasiswa, meliputi ruang kelas yang nyaman, ruang sidang, ruang baca, ruang kesehatan, laboratorium pembelajaran, ruang diskusi pasca sarjana, dan fasilitas umum lainnya seperti musola, parkir, dan toilet. Kualitas mahasiswa sistem informasi dapat dibuktikan dengan perolehan berbagai prestasi, seperti juara pertama dalam kompetisi Future Ready ASEAN di Bangkok, Thailand pada tanggal 27-28 November 2019, Best Project Manager pada kompetisi Project Manager Competition pada tanggal 27 September 2019. Pada kompetisi Gemastik tahun 2019, Sistem Informasi menyumbangkan 2 juara, yaitu juara pertama kategori Cyber Security dan juara kedua kategori Data Mining.
Hingga yang terbaru, mahasiswa Sistem Informasi menjadi pemenang dalam kompetisi COVID-19 INA Ideaton 2020 yang diselenggarakan oleh Kemenristek Indonesia.
Sebagai departemen yang ingin lulusannya dapat bersaing di dunia global, Departemen Sistem Informasi memberikan kesempatan kepada mahasiswanya untuk mengikuti program pertukaran pelajar atau Student Exchange Program ke berbagai institusi pendidikan di berbagai negara, seperti Cardiff Metropolitan University, United Kingdom. Selain itu, ada juga short program yang bekerja sama dengan Kumamoto University Japan, Inha University South Korea, Shibaura Institute of Technology Japan, dan program Joint Degree atau Double Degree khusus untuk mahasiswa pasca sarjana yang bekerja sama dengan National Cheng Kung University Taiwan, National Tsinghua University Taiwan. Di samping itu, Departemen Sistem Informasi juga sering mengadakan kuliah tamu yang menghadirkan narasumber yang expert di bidangnya masing-masing agar mahasiswa dapat memperoleh ilmu langsung dari para pakarnya. Departemen Sistem Informasi memiliki banyak sekali kegiatan tahunan seperti Information System International Conference atau ISICO dan Information System Expo atau ISE.
Baik, sambil menunggu Prof. Davison, saya akan mencoba merangkum beberapa poin-poin dari penjelasan beliau tadi ya. Menarik sekali tadi. Tadi beliau menjelaskan bahwa untuk memulai suatu proyek penelitian, kita harus melihat big picture-nya. Yang pertama, tujuan dari penelitian kita tuh apa sih sebenarnya? Dan kemudian, siapa yang bakal tertarik? Karena ini sebenarnya sudah pernah disampaikan juga di lecture yang sebelumnya, yang pertama oleh Profesor Caroline Chan, bahwa kalau nggak ada yang tertarik sama penelitian kita, siapa yang bakal baca? Jadi kalau nggak ada yang baca, terus buat apa gitu loh. Nah, jadi itu kita harus memikirkan penting ini, siapa yang bakal tertarik dengan penelitian kita. Nah, kalau menurut Profesor Robert Davidson tadi, agar penelitian kita ini menarik, itu harus bermanfaat. Dan agar bermanfaat tadi, sebaiknya dia bisa memecahkan suatu permasalahan. Dan karena dia memecahkan suatu permasalahan, maka nanti akan bisa dibentuk research question yang perlu dibuat dari penelitian tersebut. Kemudian selain tadi kita mengidentifikasi tujuannya apa dan siapa kira-kira akan tertarik, kita juga perlu fokus untuk melakukan studi literatur. Jadi tadi diminta untuk spesifik untuk membaca-baca literatur yang 5 tahun terakhir, yang terbaru. Dan tujuan kita membuat penelitian itu tadi harus bertujuan untuk menambahkan pengetahuan baru di literatur tersebut. Bukan cuma mengulang yang sudah ada, knowledge yang sudah ada. Dan kemudian yang ketiga, kita juga harus memperhatikan teori yang kita pakai, kita harus belajar dari situ dan berkontribusi dari itu juga. Dan teori ini penting agar untuk mengorganisir pemikiran kita. Dan yang terakhir tadi tentang metode-metode, tadi Prof. Davison menjelaskan banyak sekali contoh metode untuk penelitian kualitatif. Mungkin sebentar saja nih dari Bapak Ibu ada yang mau sharing apa sudah pernah melakukan penelitian kualitatif. Mungkin Bu Mahendra mau sharing yang biasa kualitatif. Atau mungkin Bapak Ibu yang lain?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh yes, okay, Professor. I ask the audience, maybe some of them done some qualitative research, and then I want them to share about their experience in doing
Sure.
qualitative research.
No problem.
Yeah, is there any one that want to share about their experience in doing qualitative research?
Maybe in Bahasa.
Oh yes, okay. Mungkin ada yang bersedia? Gak apa-apa, cerita saja. Kalau saya pribadi, saya penelitiannya kuantitatif semua. Jadi Mas tidak bisa bilang banyak kalau soal kualitatif.
If they want to share about quantitative, that's okay. But sharing it is only useful if it's maybe identifying a problem and then showing how they solve the problem.
Oh yes.
I mean, just talking about research is not. You can do it, but if we're looking at method, not results, then what are the challenges of a method, and why did they choose a particular method? I don't want them just to talk about the results of the research.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody
Yeah.
would like to say
Anybody
something?
want to share?
Well, maybe Rara Smaya would like to share.
My research is quantitative.
Then you
So,
can share. That's okay.
okay, so my research is about actually I'm from my background is engineering, computer science actually, and my research is about how we can provide a cheaper method to detect osteoporosis. So actually in Indonesia, osteoporosis detection is done by using scanning on the
MRI.
yeah no CT scan maybe about that. Yeah, it's done on the vertebral bone, and then it's very yeah pricey, and not many people do that. So a lot of people only check their bones if they're already cracked or yeah something like that. So it's already too late. So we found some research in medical that actually because osteoporosis is a metabolic disease, systematic disease, it can happen to all the bones in the body. It's not only happen in the lumbar spine bone, in the vertebral bone, but also happen in the jaw. And the cost to do jaw photo, to obtain jaw images is lot cheaper than doing lumbar spine photo. And many people do that because many people go to the dentist. So yeah, we tried how to detect osteoporosis from by using jaw image, jaw bone. Yeah, that's my research.
Okay, good. But was this very straightforward?
uh, yeah, very straightforward.
And no difficulties? You just do it. No problems encountered.
Actually, the problems is in collecting the data because we need to measure the accuracy of the method by comparing the accuracy. Does detecting osteoporosis by using jawbone is accurate? That we measure it by comparing with the result from the lumbar spine detection as the ground truth. Nah, the problem is to collect the people to do this to photo scan.
So they're not willing.
Yeah, we need to ask many people to do that.
So
And,
what would you say is the acceptance rate? What percentage of people agree if you ask them?
okay, so first, because this is like experimenting that involves human, we need to do ethical clearance.
Yep.
That's the first, and then we need to inform. We need to ask the respondent if they are willing, and then fill some informed consent like that. Yeah. Yeah, I asked them the benefit. They will mostly my audience, my respondent has not never check their bone status, bone density status.
Right.
So they most of them are excited to know that they are osteoporosis or not. Yeah.
Okay. How old are they on average?
More than 50.
More than 50. So
Years old,
are you targeting that population?
yes, because actually osteoporosis mostly affect postmenopause women. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Right.
we targeting that
You
population.
target that population then.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. I see.
Okay.
All right. Does anybody else want to share? Seems that you're the only one. Too brave. All right.
Okay.
Well, maybe they're still having their coffee break, or they've gone to sleep, or we don't know where they've gone. I'll share my screen again.
Okay.
And I'll keep going. So, if this is primarily for qualitative, but when we analyze data, we need to be able to organize it in a structured way. We also need to look for patterns. We need to look for people saying similar things, and then try and find evidence that will support theoretical constructs. So mostly this is interview data. I did a study recently in a Hong Kong company, and we had over 20,000 words of data. This is interviews with 31 people. So, you know, it's about 700, 800 words for each person. And there is software that you can use for qualitative data analysis. Personally, I don't like the software because I feel it keeps me too far away from the data. It's like the software helps me, but I don't really feel what the data is telling me. So what I prefer to do is I prefer to read the interviews. And 20,000 words, it will take several hours to read them carefully. And when I read them, I have a colored pen or many colored pens, and I will underline or highlight particular text with different colors. And I'll start to sort things out. I'll start to look for different people talking about different things, and then I'll start to reorganize the data in a thematic way. So by theme. And in this, and I may have to do this many times. Maybe the themes will change, maybe some themes get joined together, maybe some themes get broken into different pieces. But the idea is to try and create an understanding of the data. Not just the understanding of one person, but the understanding of different themes within the data. I'll show you some examples in a moment. So we look for patterns, we look for themes, we look for people saying the same things. Quite likely some themes will be dominant and others will be less obvious. Here, a pattern is not just a visual pattern, it's a mental pattern. It's not people using exactly the same words, but it's people referring to the same kind of situation and then explaining how they experience it, how they feel about it, or what do they do? What actions do they take when they are in this situation? And when we organize the data, we need to create a hierarchy of themes from high level to low level. The themes may come out of the data inductively, or they may come from literature deductively, or both. And so obviously when I'm doing this research, I know what's in the literature. I know what other people have said or other people have found in previous studies. And I can refer back to those things. Maybe the interview data is very similar to what's in the literature already, or maybe it's different. Maybe people are saying things which is not in the literature, and I can identify new themes. So I need to be quite open-minded when I look at this process, so that I can create a more complete and to create a contribution that doesn't have those spurious correlations or spurious understandings which might happen if I'm not careful. It's better if I get more data from more people. If I get different people saying the same thing or saying something very similar, because this will help me to triangulate. So the slide here is probably a little difficult to read. This is the summary of some of my data analysis from a recent study. On the far right-hand side, there are two ovals, coordination of workarounds and persistent workarounds. And those are my two high-level themes, or aggregate dimensions, as I'm calling them. So I'm suggesting that the data which I'm interested in, and there is more data which I'm not interested, but the data I'm interested in can be grouped into these two themes, coordination of workarounds and persistent of workarounds. The level below that, I have sharing knowledge about workarounds, consensus building, co-design of workarounds, and then at the bottom, formalize and continuous usage. And so these are second level themes, which I was able to create. The words are mine. The words have not come from literature. And they are essentially summarizing the first level coding, which you can see on the left-hand side. And so the first level coding, these are direct quotations from the interviews. And so I've extracted those from the interviews. The letters in brackets at the end of each one, like JA or IL, these refer to a person. And I will have a table listing all the people. So of course this is anonymous, so I make up new codes. The codes don't really match their names, they're just codes. And so in this way, I'm trying to show that these people are talking about similar things, and out of that, I can create these themes and then these aggregate dimensions. So this is the theorization process. It's the creating theoretical constructs. So coordination and persistence, those are the theoretical constructs, the high-level ones. And then the 5 in the middle, sharing knowledge, consensus building, co-design, formalized, continuous, those, you can say those are constructs as well. But I'm choosing here to theorize at a higher level. And I'm theorizing inductively. There is some literature in here, but not very much. And I was not able to find any literature about coordination of workarounds or about persistent workarounds. It simply doesn't exist. I can't find those sources. So this is my contribution to knowledge, 2 new constructs, which we need to do more studies about. So if I'm careful, I can build a theory out of the data. I have a new way to explain what's happening, a new way to explain what people are doing, how they're doing it. I may be able to identify new constructs not previously reported in the literature. And so coordination of workarounds is a new construct. Persistence of workarounds is a new construct. Of course, coordination itself is not new and persistence is not new, but no one's used those words previously when referring to workarounds. And I know that because I searched all the workaround literature for those keywords and I couldn't find anything. So I'm identifying new kinds of behavior related to sharing of knowledge, related to workarounds, which was not previously discussed in the literature. And that's the nature of my contribution. But there's no boxes and arrows diagram. If we go back to the previous slide, this slide is not a box and arrow diagram in the sense of TAM. This is a diagram to show how the different interview data relates to, but there's no cause and effect relationship here. The arrows don't have that causality implied. The arrows are simply showing these things are related to each other, but not cause and effect. So the constructs here not reported previously, and qualitative case studies like this one are an interesting way of building theory, where I'm drawing on case data inductively in order to support theoretical ideas. Tony, have you arrived?
Yeah. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Hello, Mr. Tony.
Hi, how are you? Thank you. Just landing, and now I'm in a taxi. That's okay.
Oh, okay.
All right, no problems. Well, you can. We just finished our break, so
Okay.
this is part 2.
Okay.
I'm not sure if the traffic will allow you to arrive in time or not. We'll see.
Okay.
I'm gonna keep going for the moment.
Good. Cool.
Okay.
No
So
worries.
we've been looking at research backgrounds, research problems, research questions.
Mhm.
We've been looking at different types of data and different methods that might be used.
Okay. Cool.
And then I'm giving some examples from my own research.
Okay.
When we look at qualitative research and qualitative researchers, I see 2 different types of person. One is an observer and one is an intervener. The observer is someone who is watching, who is measuring, who's looking at people, looking at things. And this is common for case studies and ethnography. The intervener is a person who is interested in observation, but also in change. And so the medical diagnosis is a relevant metaphor. It's the person who's diagnosing what's happening in this situation, what's wrong in this situation. What do I need to do to change it in order to improve and solve the problem? And Raras Maya, I think that you are an intervener. You may not be doing qualitative research, but you are an intervener because you're trying to change things. You're diagnosing a problem and you're suggesting change for that problem. So I would argue there are elements of action research to what you're doing, even though you don't use that word yourself. When I go into an organization, I need to be very careful not to forget that I'm a researcher. I say this because when you are inside the organization, it can be very exciting. You can talk to interesting people, you can have interesting conversations, and it's easy to forget why you're there. It's easy to forget who you are. It's easy to forget your research questions. So somehow you need to keep those research questions in your mind because you want to collect data that will help you to answer the questions. If the data is not helpful, then the research will fail, even if the conversation was interesting. You need to respect privacy. And yet, of course, you do want to write down what they say. You want to record what they say. So we normally try to hide the identity of people. So when I use those letters JA and IL and DW and PC and so on, there's no way to match those to real people. They're just codes. I need the code so I know who said what, and I know the same person said different things, and I can match what they said on different occasions. And the reader may find that useful as well. But I don't want to identify people's real identity by mistake, especially if you've promised, or especially if your ethics review committee has demanded that you protect their privacy. Now, in some situations, the researcher also works in the same organization where they're doing the research, like an insider. If you study your own university, you're an insider. That may give you a lot of privilege. It may enable you to talk to people in a very easy way. It may give you an inside perspective on what happens. That can be a wonderful advantage to give you access to data. But you have to be a little careful because when you're an insider, you may be less sensitive to ethical issues. And other people may be less sensitive to you because you are just one of them. They won't see you as an outsider. So the ethical principles will still apply. And you'll have to be very careful to protect the interests of the other employees who you're talking to. You can't just do whatever you want. As you're doing the research with your method, you need to collect evidence, enough evidence to answer your research questions. If you're doing a survey and you've only got 50 responses, 50 won't be enough. You'll have to go and find more. That may be hard. If nobody wants to answer your questions, what do? Somebody asked me the question earlier, how do I write questions that will be answered properly by research subjects? And I gave some suggestions. But another part of this is, how do I create a questionnaire which people are willing to answer? it's not just what the questions are, it's also how many questions. How much time do they need? When I do these online questionnaires myself, in the introduction, it commonly says, we estimate you will need 10 minutes to answer this questionnaire. And when I do it, it takes me half an hour. And so it seems that they are deliberately underestimating the time so as to encourage me to participate. Because if they say, we think it will take half an hour, probably nobody is going to answer. It's just too much time. But then maybe you need to make your questions shorter. Maybe it's too long. And so somebody else asked me, how many constructs do I need to have in a research model? And I said, well, it depends. For a mid-range theory, maybe 4 to 6, plus some demographics, so maybe 10 in total. So maybe we're talking about 50 questions. How long does it take to answer 50 questions? Well, it's going to take at least 10 minutes. And that's if you're concentrated and you're focused and you're doing it quickly. And if you get interrupted, then it might take you 20 or 30 minutes. So you need to think about this. I do remember when I was a student, I had a survey question with 200 questions, which was stupid. There's no way I'm going to persuade people to answer 200 questions. Not possible. So you may be very interested to get the answer to lots and lots of questions, but you have to ask yourself, do I really need to ask those questions? Is it absolutely important, essential? Or is it just I'm too nosy and I like gossip and I want to uncover all this information for my future benefit? I hope not. But you need to make sure that the evidence you collect is necessary, is essential, is exactly what you need, but you don't collect data that you don't need. Because if you do, you're wasting the time of the research subjects, and probably you will get a lower response rate. So you must focus. When you collect data, of course, if you're doing surveys, and you find that the data is causing the theory to be rejected, how do you feel about that? Is it good for a theory to be rejected? Maybe I should open this question to you. Anyone like to talk about this? How do you feel when the theory is not supported by the data?
Okay, I guess.
I said my opinion.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think any result will be interesting. So we have to be first, because our intention is to discover the new knowledge. So there must be any possibility to find another or some opposite effect, not the same with the theory. So the most important is we have to make sure that our data that we collect is really valid, and then we also make sure to find the explanation of our finding.
Yep.
based on our data, empirical data, and also based on maybe other theory that support our theory. So doesn't matter whether this is support our first hypothesis or if it is not support or maybe opposite of our hypothesis. The most important is the fact. We must make sure the empirical data, the data, and also the logical justification and also theoretical justification for our finding.
Yep, I agree. So Amna says if it's not supported, it can be good because it's open to the opportunity for new theorization, not supported by current theory. Exactly. So maybe the old theory is wrong, or maybe the old theory is not valid, or it's not complete. And so we create this opportunity for new theorization, certainly. So challenging the theory is what we do, testing the theory. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't work, then we have to have an open mind and we have to start thinking, what happened? Why did it go wrong?
Robert.
Yeah.
Say that you found a very like you wrote what you wrote here, it doesn't fit what you thought you would find. But would you write that in the paper?
It depends how honest you want to be. Yes, I think you should, because when you write the initial argument for the hypothesis, you have to explain it. And then when you see the results and you have to explain the results, you have to try and explain what went wrong, try and explain why the hypothesis was rejected. And then you have to revisit your earlier arguments and you have to think about them, and maybe they don't make sense, but that can be very difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
What you could do is to do an interview after the survey, and in the interview, you talk to some of the respondents and say, we found that this hypothesis was not supported. Could you tell us anything that might help us to understand why? And so you do a post-interview focus group.
Okay.
And you talk to the same people who did the survey, not all of them, but a small number. I find that this can also be quite helpful, because maybe they are thinking about something which I can't imagine. Or maybe they misunderstand the question.
That could be possible, but what if our earlier construct is the one that is not acceptable, or you try to make something that maybe it's too theoretical, or it just doesn't apply in reality. How would you write that?
Well, I'd have to go back to the text of the papers, but from memory, what I would say is something like, we were surprised that this construct or this hypothesis was rejected, or maybe it was inverse. We were puzzled about this. We reflected on it. We also ran a focus group with respondents. They suggested that the reason could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. We particularly think that explanation 2 and 4 makes sense, but we'll have to leave it for future researchers to investigate further.
Okay.
You can't go too far. You can only speculate.
Yeah.
But I think some level of honest speculation is appreciated by the reviewers. Mm-hmm. But you cannot be 100% sure, certainly. Mm-hmm. It might be an artifact of the instrument measurement. It might be the way the questions are written. Mm. Maybe not for these people, but for some people, some of the respondents. It may be that my understanding of the construct is different from the respondent's understanding.
Yeah.
I think this is more likely to happen in cross-cultural contexts. So using my logic and my literature understanding, create some questions. The respondents don't have the same background. And so when they answer the question, they're thinking of something different. Mm-hmm. So this is why we have to be very careful with instrument design, and why we should do pilot testing. And so we try to test the same instruments in the same culture where we will be collecting data later, and see if that helps us to identify any problems. But things go wrong sometimes. Things don't always work out. And personally, I like it when hypotheses are rejected. I like to be wrong because it pushes me to think, well, what could be different? And I think that's one of the most interesting parts of doing research. Mm-hmm. It's being humble and being in the position where you understand that what you thought was true simply isn't true. And then you have to rethink it. Mm-hmm. And that's maybe not very easy, but I do think it's useful. Ember asked a question about different perspectives in aggregating dimensions and second-order themes from data when you have multiple authors. Yeah, that can happen. I agree. So the authors have to be willing to talk to each other, and they have to be willing to reach consensus. And if they're not willing to reach a consensus, then you can't work with that person. So normally there'll be one person who will do the initial theorizing and will share the feedback with other people. And they will give suggestions, and then you modify the theorizing. But I think the basic criteria is that everybody must be open to change. Everybody must be willing to try to build consensus about what the themes or dimensions should be. And if any one person is not willing to listen, not willing to change, that person should not be a member of the research team, because they will cause too much trouble. For this reason, I work with very, very few people on this kind of research, because it takes so much time for me to build the relationship with those people so that we understand each other and we respect each other. I can certainly imagine problems when the researchers don't agree and cannot talk and cannot compromise. Abdul Rahman asked, is it possible to make generalization from action research because it focuses in one or two subjects? Well, I mean, let's say you do a survey of 300 people. Can you generalize that? You can generalize to similar people. Can you generalize to different people? I don't think so. You know, you go and do a survey of Indonesian students. Can you generalize that to Hong Kong students? I don't think so. It doesn't make sense. They're too different. You can generalize to other Indonesian students, perhaps. So with action research, no, you can't generalize because all companies are different. Well, you can't generalize to other companies, but you can generalize to theory. And so what I mean is, out of the action research, you build a new theory to explain what's happening. That theory can be tested by you or by other researchers in other contexts. If the theory works in other contexts, there's your generalization. If it doesn't work, maybe we have to change it. We have to collect more valid data. But generalizing through theory is equally good to generalizing from one context to another context, in my opinion. And when you have these kinds of studies which have relatively narrow scope, generalizing to theory makes more sense. Amna, in Yin's case study, we're asked to develop alternate hypothesis or explanation. I find that a bit counterproductive. I'm not a big fan of Yin. Yin is writing primarily about positivist case study, not interpretivist case study. And my case study tend to be interpretive. So you could generate alternate hypothesis, or you could generate null hypothesis. But I find it somewhat somewhat peculiar, somewhat weird. I don't feel very comfortable with the idea of generating alternate hypotheses, especially if they're very different. If you're just asking a similar question in a similar way, I see no point. If you're asking something totally different, or you're hypothesizing something totally different, you will have to change your arguments. So why would you want to do that? But as I say, I'm not a big fan of Yin. And Yin is not the only person to cite for case studies.
All right. So can you name some that you are a big fan of then, Robert? Other than yourself, of course.
Other than myself, of course. Go and look at the work of Shan Pan and Barney Tan. Let me type those into the chat here.
Yes, please.
Sorry, I sent that wrong. Hold on. Hold a second. These people.
Okay.
They have a paper. Well, if you search for them, you'll find their papers, and they do a lot of case study research. They have methods papers, but they also have their own case studies which they work on. They used to work together because Barney Tan was the PhD student of Champagne. Right now, they're not working together; they're working independently, but they still both do case studies.
Oh, okay.
And so you could look at those. Yeah.
Professor Davison, there is some question on the YouTube. May I
thought
ask?
there might. Yes, go ahead.
From Mrs. Tining Haryanti. I have done qualitative research and I would like to implement the result of this research into quantitative research. Then, if different results are found in the quantitative research, does that mean that there is an error in the qualitative research? Or do we need quantitative research more to prove the validity of previous qualitative research recommendation?
If you find an error, if you find something doesn't fit, that doesn't automatically mean there's an error in the first one. It may be that the context is different, the population is different. I think collecting more data will be sensible. Saying the first study is wrong because of one mistake seems a bit unreasonable. I think it's actually quite a good idea to do qualitative first and quantitative second. And the reason is the qualitative study can help you to identify the constructs more carefully and collect evidence to support those constructs before you do a quantitative study to validate. But the nature of the two studies is quite different. A qualitative study is exploring, investigating, going in much more detail. A survey is looking to validate, yes, but from a much larger population. When you ask the survey questions, you can't ask the questions in the same way that you would ask qualitative questions. Qualitative, you can have lots and lots of details, lots of interesting explanation. In the survey, you can't do that. You simply have a question and an answer. So sometimes it happens that the quantitative doesn't support the qualitative because of the way the questions are framed. But if you repeat multiple times, you should be able to overcome that.
So the key is repetition and number of data, right?
Yeah.
And she also asked another question. Can we start qualitative research, specifically case study method, from quantitative research finding?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes, you can.
And how to measure readers will be interested if the object, for example, location or place, is really specific. For example, in certain small and medium-sized enterprise in Indonesia, which may not exist in other country.
Well, small and medium-sized enterprises certainly exist everywhere. I don't think Indonesia itself is a problem for the research. What might be a problem is the research question. If the research question is very narrow, then that might be a problem. But, if I say I do a study of small and medium-sized enterprises in a small town in America, is that less interesting or more interesting than the same study in SMEs in Indonesia? For me, they're the same. America or Indonesia makes no difference. A study of SMEs is still a study of SMEs. But I guess you should be asking a detailed question about the SMEs. What is it about the SMEs that's interesting? What is it about the SMEs that we don't know? And this study will help us to answer.
Okay, thank you. And then also there is Mr. Stanley Carlo. How can we sure that we conduct only qualitative research? Is there any distinctive criteria to call my research qualitative?
I don't understand.
Yeah, he's confused whether his research is qualitative or quantitative. Is there any distinct criteria?
Well, quantitative tends to mean numbers.
Yeah.
And so numbers tends to be survey data where you tick a box 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, And so the number, the quantitative is your response to the survey question, whereas case study tends to be words, and people talk. And so you can type up words. So to me, that's the difference.
Yeah,
At a simple level, quantitative involves numbers and qualitative involves everything else.
Yes. Yes.
It could be words, it could be observations, it could be descriptions, it could be photographs, it could be recordings, but not numbers.
Yes, okay, thank you. And then there's also Mr. Lutfi. He is asking your opinion about a trend in qualitative analysis using RASCH model, RASCH.
I don't know this.
Oh yeah, okay.
Sorry, I can't comment on things I don't know. I mean, so I have no idea.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all.
All right, then we go on from here. So I think in all of these situations, qualitative or quantitative, you need to keep very careful notes. Even if you're doing a survey, you probably talk to someone at some stage. You're negotiating access to the people. You're going to find a way to access the data. You're going to talk to people to ask permission to do a survey. The conversation should be useful. The other thing is always to think about theory. As you're doing the research, you need to reflect on theory. Is the data supporting the theory? Is the data consistent with the theory? Does it fit? Or is something missing? If the theory is not being supported, and this is particularly true for qualitative, do you need to change the theory? Well, because you can change the theory. In survey, it's difficult because the survey itself is based on a theory. And if the data doesn't support the theory, that's the end of the story. You can explain why, but you can't change anything. In a qualitative paper, it's possible to change the theory and then collect new data. Or even to change the data, to change the theory and use the existing data if it will fit. So qualitative tends to be a little bit more open, at least open to new theory. And if you're collecting data that is not what you expected, you may still be able to use it to develop a new theory, especially if the existing theory is not adequate. I see another question. How many theories is an appropriate number? How many theories do you know? As you read more and as you become familiar with more theories, so your personal repertoire, your personal knowledge bank of theories will grow. A PhD student is likely to be familiar with fewer theories. A professor probably is familiar with more theories, but I can't give you a number. I think you need to be aware of theories in general. Let me give you a link. Hold on, I'm going to disappear and I'm going to come back. Let me have a look here. This I want to. Right, I'm going to type a link into the chat. This link is to a wiki, and the wiki is listing, I don't know, 120 theories, something like that. It's not complete, but this is a list of theories used in IS research. And I would suggest that you should be aware of this website, this wiki, and it will be very useful to look at some of these theories and see what they do, see what they talk about. You don't have to be an expert, but you need to know something about them. And then that will help you when you enter the field, because it will mean that you have some theoretical ideas which you can use when you are thinking about particular situations. So I hope that's some kind of an answer to the question. Hold on, where is my list of comments? Okay, now there's some principles for hermeneutic analysis, interpretive analysis, which are quite useful. I don't really want to read all this out, so I'm going to go through just a few of these. They're principles which were published in an MISQ paper about 20 years ago. And I think some of the ideas in here may be quite helpful as you think about theory and method. So the first one about human understanding coming from iterating between the independent meaning of the parts and the whole. When you're studying a phenomenon, you can't see the whole thing at one time. We tend to focus on bits, on constructs, on ideas. And we need to move between the big picture and the small picture. And as we make that move, our understanding may change. And so it means that you have to move backwards and forwards from the data to the theory, to the data, the theory, until your theory makes sense and it's consistent with the data. That can take a number of passes. So earlier I showed you the 3-level diagram of interview data to second level theme to higher level dimension. Achieving that diagram or creating that diagram took 6 months. It wasn't something I can just do. There are many, many previous versions before that version. I'm just showing you the last one. But there was a lot of work that went into creating that diagram. And that was the iteration between exactly what are we studying. So for example, workarounds, and we looked at collective workarounds, individual workarounds, and then later on, someone suggested coordinated workarounds. And we look at our data and we see if we have any data to support the idea that workarounds are coordinated. Coordinated was good because no one has ever published on coordinated workarounds. We didn't find it. And so we were looking for a new contribution to make, which we can identify from our data. And that was the way we did it, but it took quite a long time to get there. The figure I showed you comes from version 4 of the paper. In version 3, we didn't have that diagram. Version 2, we didn't have that diagram. Only in the most recent version. And so as I revise the paper, so the paper changes. So the analysis changes. So the way I present the analysis also changes. And it just takes time. You have to be patient and you have to let it happen slowly. You can't really rush. So you need to iterate between the data and the theory several times. I think this could happen actually in a survey as well. That you have your research model, you have your arguments, but you have to make the arguments better. The reviewers may not like the arguments. They may say you have to make the argument stronger. So again, you're iterating from the argument to the hypothesis, to the construct. And when you get the data and you analyze it and you see which hypothesis is supported and which one is not, then again, you have to argue to explain the ones that are not. Suggestion that we need to think about social and historical background of the research context. I think this is particularly true in case studies, but I could see in a survey it's relevant to think about the historical background of the people. particularly if it's a survey inside an organization. Because the social and historical background of the organization may influence the way people answer questions, may influence their understanding of the things you're talking about. And if you don't look at that, then you're going to miss something. Last week, I talked about the problem of the student data. And I pointed out that the researchers failed to notice that the students had a huge social context, and they used that social context to answer the questions, rather than using the research context to answer the questions in the survey. And because the researchers didn't see that and didn't know, they couldn't find that as an explanation. And when all their hypotheses were rejected, they didn't know why they're rejected. But the reason is because the students were ignoring the rules. They weren't using research context. Instead, they were using social context. So who are the people who are answering your questions? What is their background? How do they know each other? We may need to find that information as background information to help us understand the context where the data is being collected. When a researcher interacts with research subjects, who may be students, who may be employees, who may be managers, that interaction will change the way the research subjects behave or think. So I can't treat them as completely pure. As soon as I start talking to them and they start listening to me, they may change their opinions. If it's a survey, the same is true. No, I have survey instructions at the beginning. Please think about this subject. Please answer the questions honestly. Please do not think about the questions. All of those instructions will influence the way they answer the questions, consciously or unconsciously. We can't stop that happening. But there is going to be some impact from the social relationship between the researchers and the people who are providing data. And we need to be aware of those biases. I'm going to skip this one. We've talked about generalization to some extent already. There is a problem that takes place when you have a very good understanding of the literature and the theory, but the data doesn't match. And then the data says something else is true. And you need to have a dialogue. You need to have a conversation with yourself to make sense of why is the data not supporting the theory. Maybe you have to bring other people into the conversation as well. But maybe the theory has to change, or maybe you need new data, or both. Sorry, I think I interrupted someone. Did someone say something?
Yeah. Can I ask something?
Please.
Yeah. So the point about the concept that you said about the research context and the respondent context is very interesting for me. It means, if I'm not wrong, from your what you said, is it is important for us as a researcher to make sure that our respondent, that we pick the respondent context, is matched with our research context. So yes. From the previous question from the participant, they asked us about how many sample or participant for our qualitative, or who will be the so from your point is, so it's not about the number. It's not about the number. It's about first whether our participant is really matched with our research context.
Yes.
And whether the not the number, but the who they are is really represented the context that we want to cover from our our research. So we also need to have a limitation about the context that we want to investigate. So
Yes.
that will lead our choice about the participant. But there also another possibility. Maybe our research context itself that wrong. Maybe when, for example, when we pick some respondent that we found that the context, what, for example, what they think, what they feel, what they behave, is really different what we that a bit our research context. Maybe when we develop the conceptual model is not right. Maybe we not really look at really closely with the real situation. Maybe we just develop the conceptual model just based on the for example Western theory, like for example as I said before, innovation of diffusion of innovation theory. That's all is developed many from, for example, from West associative, for example. Yep. Then when we develop the conceptual model, then we try to find the respondent from Asian, for example. Then look why they are different. Maybe not. There is no wrong with our participant. Maybe our research context itself that wrong. That should be modified if we really want to investigate with the Asian context. What do you think?
No, I agree. I agree totally. Certainly getting, I mean, with survey research, you do have to have the right number. And with qualitative research, you still need to have a certain number. But getting the right people is certainly equally important. If you get the wrong people, then it doesn't matter how many you get. Wrong is wrong. But yes, certainly it's quite possible that the research model itself is misunderstood or misconstructed. And it's not appropriate to put together in this way. And so when you find the discrepancies, it might be there's a problem with the data, or it might be a problem with the theory. But it's not good to assume it must be the data that's wrong. And there could be a number of causes of problems.
And so, I still believe that number of participants, the more we have the number of participants is better, even in qualitative. It's just like the analogy of number of dot. We trying to figure out whether this is circle, with this is triangle. The more we have more dot, the clearlier the shape of the shape of our that we want to find out. So with that analogy, if someone asks me number of the participant, like I don't have the minimum number, but the more we have the number, even for the qualitative number, is better, right? Because we will have more data.
You will, right? But when you have more data, you may have more problems. Because if all those people say totally different things, then it may be very difficult to create a single understanding. What you referred to last week as a single truth. So there is a risk of having too many opinions. Now, if I interview 50 people or I interview 5,000 people, you might argue the theory based on 5,000 is more accurate, but it's probably much more difficult to create, or I have to throw away more data. There is some data I just can't use because it is too different. It's a little bit like the question of how many reviewers should I have for a paper? If I get 2 reviewers, I get 2 opinions. If I get 10 reviewers, I get 10 opinions. But most reviewers tend to reject. Therefore, if I have 10 reviewers, the chance of rejection is much higher than if I only have 2. So I understand the sentiment. I understand the logic of more data is better. And intuitively, I agree with you. I agree, more data is probably better. But practically, I also understand more data may create more trouble. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's the why people said subjectivism. I mean, because then that's the role of the researcher. The researcher that will define where the research goes.
Yes.
So, okay.
And subjectively, you will decide which data to use and which data not to use. But you may be quite subjective. No, you pick particular quotations and you ignore other ones. It's your subjective choice. You pick the data that supports what you want to say, and you ignore the data that does not support what you want to say. I'm not sure if that's ethical, but it's certainly common.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me go back to where I was. This principle of multiple interpretations is something we've had before. Somebody asked me, if you're coding data and you have to identify themes and dimensions, what happens when the researchers disagree with each other? And so there can be differences of interpretation about events or about situations. It can be between the subjects themselves, so that the people you interview may disagree with each other. Even when they're describing the same thing, they see it in a different way. That's normal. That's entirely reasonable to have different interpretations. The researchers themselves can have different interpretations. And somehow you need to reach consensus. You need to look for a common view which everybody can accept. Amna asks, if we have two contradictions, which participants we will select? The senior one, the knowledgeable one? I'd say the one where you have stronger evidence. So maybe you have one senior person or you have 25 junior people. I think the 25 will win. However, if you think the senior opinion is reasonable, you may want to refer to it somewhere else. Seniority you can measure reasonably well. Knowledgeability is almost impossible to measure. I don't think there is a standard measure for whether somebody is knowledgeable or not. My basic principle at the start will be to respect all of the views of the different respondents. But if there is one respondent who has a very strong opinion that's not shared by anyone else, I may not refer to it. I may leave it on the side. Because in any study, you can't have all the data. It's not possible. You're going to have to choose to include some and choose to exclude some. Otherwise, you'll never finish.
When you exclude his opinion, do we need to have a reason? Like, do we need to put on our paper or our research report?
No.
Like,
I think you should have a reason, yes, but I don't think you have to write the reason because it will be too. I mean, how about you want to exclude 250 opinions? You can't write 250 explanations. It's not possible. So in general, no. I mean, this is where we have to trust people. So we trust researchers to be honest. We trust researchers not to fabricate data, not to be fraudulent, not to make things up, and not to exclude things unreasonably. But maybe people do those things. Maybe people are unreliable. But I don't think you can explain every time. It's too much to do. The principle of suspicion is something to be careful of, particularly for qualitative, because some people you interview may tell lies, or they may make things exaggerated, or they may make things seem much worse than they really are, because it is to their advantage. So they may deliberately try to damage the organization when they talk. They may deliberately give you bad examples or unreasonable or unusual examples. If they are also native speakers, they may deliberately use jokes or humor or maybe some political connections to explain their answers, which you have to be very careful with. You shouldn't just take them literally. So if someone makes a remark which you think is ridiculous, it's too strong, it's too biased, maybe you don't accept it literally. You could ask them to explain more carefully, or you could drop it. I don't think that including a large number of outlying remarks in the interview data is going to be helpful. Particularly in the tensions between management and employees. So if employees say a lot of bad things about their boss, you can listen, you may agree with them that these are problems, but I suggest you don't include that in the analysis, because it may be that their boss is really not very nice and they are just taking revenge on the boss. And unless that's what you're interested in, probably you should ignore it. So my last slide is how to choose the right method. And there's no information on this slide because it's the question for you. So I'm going to open this. You've listened to me for the last 2.5 hours. I see we still have one more question. Oh, no, we don't. I've answered that one. So how to choose the right method? What do you think?
I think Pak Tony should answer first.
No, I don't think Pak Tony should answer the question first, because everybody else will say nothing. Okay. I want Pak Tony to answer the question last.
Well, he didn't listen half of your talk in the beginning.
Well, it's even more unfair for him in that case.
It's
so
his
I want the others. I want the silent majority to offer some thoughts.
Cool.
Okay, so at least Pak Tony can choose one for Robert, because Robert don't know anybody. So
okay, Tony can pick someone, no problem.
Yeah.
Yep, I will ask postgraduate student. Yuk, yang mahasiswa S2, pendapatnya gimana cara milih metodenya? Yuk, siapa? Yauma? Yauma. Rahman siapin ya.
Halo, Pak.
If you want to get credit for this class, you have to answer the question.
Yeah, and this is to answer the question, how you choose the right method. Gimana caranya kamu milih metode yang benar, in your opinion, based on the material that you listen today.
And also based on your own thoughts.
Okay, cool.
Ya. Kalau saya mikirnya mungkin ya Pak ya. Pertama, ya umumnya sih saya akan menyesuaikan dengan tema saya. Kemudian saya sesuaikan narasumbernya ya Pak.
Oke.
Nah, kemudian metodenya sih saya akan melakukan ya survei, kemudian sebagaimana yang Bapak sampaikan tadi, mungkin saya akan berhati-hati supaya pertanyaannya itu nggak salah gitu loh Pak. Jadi saya mungkin pertanyaannya nanti akan lebih saya kaji supaya pertanyaannya tepat ke orang yang tepat gitu sih Pak.
So why do you choose? Sorry, Robert, I'm trying to translate in English
from
first.
Robert's side because he doesn't understand.
Yeah. I will translate in English first. Yauma, so why you choose survey in your topic? That's the question.
Karena untuk
you turn on your video. I'd like to see you.
Oh yeah, Yauma, please turn on your video. Turn on your video, please.
Yes, wait.
Oh, too shy.
Much too shy.
Sometimes
Robert. He's probably in his pajamas. Oh,
yeah, probably, or less. Yes.
So why you choose that's the point of the question. Like you said, Yauma is going to do research in e-government, Robert. Yeah. So he worked for the government, local government in Kalimantan Island.
Okay.
So, and then he planned to investigate about the human resource in e-government. And then he chose a survey method. So then I asked him why. That's the point of your question. Why he choose research survey method? Kenapa Yoma you choose research method? Survey method, sorry.
What was his answer?
Kenapa? Why? Why?
Yang pertama ya karena untuk menjawab hal-hal yang mungkin saya perlu konfirmasi, Pak. Nah, kemudian yang kedua mungkin selain kuesioner nanti saya juga akan melakukan tanya jawab untuk mengkonfirmasinya, Pak.
Interview.
Ya, interview untuk mengonfirmasi hasil survei tersebut, Pak.
Surveinya will be open-ended question or will be guide. You will guide the question like you give.
Iya. Ya,
you give
lebih ke arah menggait sih, Pak. Rencananya kayak gitu, Pak.
Okay. So he choose the survey because he is trying to. He will come up first with the first idea from the theory, then trying to validate based on the with the survey, trying to validate the construct, and then after that to confirm and to find the explanation by interview, Robert.
Yes.
So yeah, Yoma is still believe on the theory first, then confirm with the survey, yes. Then trying to find the explanation from the interview.
Okay. Like so I wonder how many local Indonesian things will go into the survey, or if it's based only on theory, it's probably purely Western theory and therefore purely Western questions, and you can test the theory with Indonesian data, that's no problem, but you learn very little about Indonesia because there's nothing Indonesian about the survey questions. That's the problem.
That's interesting.
I don't know if he wants to learn anything about Indonesia or he just wants to collect data for his thesis.
I think the one in the beginning, the question that Pak Tony asked in the beginning, you haven't summarized his answer. Like, what did he think of a research method? How to choose it?
Yeah, how to choose it. So why survey? Why is he doing survey?
Survei karena saya ingin mendapat gambaran sih, Pak. Maksudnya karena itu apa ya?
It's easier. Maybe it's easier. Maybe it saves time.
Ya, mungkin.
Maybe it's easy to collect the data.
Yes.
Okay. But this is not a good reason.
Yes, I'm sorry.
It's a reason, but not a good reason.
Yes.
Based on what you hear Robert mentioned earlier, then it should be something to do with the type of data or research questions that you have, I think. What is the research question?
Yes. What is the research question?
Yeah, it's okay. Another opinion, maybe, Benjamin.
I think this is all Pak Tony's students, so we're.
No, this is the research methodology class. Is the lecturer is me and also Professor Arif and Pak Mujahidin. So it's a group of lecturer. Well, Benjamin, are you still there?
Anybody can type questions in the chat. I don't mind.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you can type on the chat as well. Okay.
Is Benjamin there or not there?
Okay, I will.
Find me out of bed.
Ya. Nisa, ada Nis di depan Nis. Nisa, are you there? Atau Bakari? Nisa ada nggak? Nisa di depan. Nggak ada.
Is it possible to force the microphone to be turned on?
Okay.
I'm here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm following.
Oh, Bakari, yeah. So where are you from, Bakari?
I'm from Tanzania.
Tanzania. So let's hear your opinion about how you choose the right method. Bakari is one of the student, international student from Tanzania, Robert.
Okay.
Okay, so how you answer this question? How you choose the right method, Bakari?
Yeah, according to my case study, when I check and I choose my case study. So according to the environment of that case study, I saw that the method that I can use depends to my case study and the topic, because I'm using the quantitative research. So it makes me it gives me a lot of time to think, but finally I decided to choose the PLS-SEM, the partial least square. Yeah.
Why?
Bakari, are you still there?
That's it.
You said you have lots of time to think, okay, and you've done lots of thinking, good, and then you decide to use PLS, which I suppose was with a survey. I'm saying why? Yeah. Why PLS and why survey?
Yeah.
No answer.
According, yeah,
no. Probably your supervisor advised you to.
Not me.
Yes, I was preparing to put my video on.
See, now we can see you.
I had
see you, but we can't hear you.
Yeah, I had a conversation also, and as he sees how I can analyze, so he advised that you use the technique.
I'm sorry, your voice is breaking up. I can't hear you.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Okay. Maybe it's easier for people to type. Maybe typing is more reliable.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's one answer, I think, there in the chat room.
Yeah, Abdul Rahman puts, I will, based on my research question, if I want to understand something concept model, I will use qualitative. If I want to test or confirm, I use quantitative. Okay, as a general answer, it's fine. But you can test and confirm with qualitative as well. So, and I don't think those actions are exclusively associated with qualitative or quantitative data. I would rather say, if your research question is, how does something happen or why does something happen, then a qualitative approach is probably more suitable. If your question is, what is the relationship between something, then probably a quantitative approach is going to work. But in most situations, you could go either way. In most situations, you don't have only one method. There can be at least 2 methods or 3 methods that you could apply. And they could be qualitative or quantitative or both. It's quite unusual to have a situation where there's only one possible method. I would actually suggest using 2 methods is good because it will help you triangulate. It will help you get a richer understanding of something.
But it's going to take longer. So a lot of it's gonna take.
It will take longer. Yes, of course. Yeah. So I'm speaking in ideal terms. If you have limited time, you can't.
Yeah, I mean.
Probably survey is fastest if you have limited time.
Yeah.
Because you can use existing instruments, you can use existing models, you can make some small changes, and the statistics will run fairly quickly. The only problem is if all your hypotheses are rejected, you have to explain why. That's the biggest problem. You have to have good theoretical reasoning. Qualitative will take more time, for sure.
And certainly because most of our students, they took from the already established theory or models, sometimes the one that they took is a very big model, and then they don't really have time to collect as much data as needed. So
maybe
also
they just throw away part of the model and make it more simple. But then you end up with an unvalidated model. And for a student project, that's okay. But for publishing, it's not. So I think then we have to ask, what's the purpose of doing the research? Is the purpose simply to get a degree and graduate and go away and never come back? Or is the purpose to publish something that will have value in the longer term? And that's a personal motivation.
Yeah.
And so the way I talk to students and the way I talk to teachers and lecturers and professors is going to be different, because there are different expectations and different hopes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Robert.
Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering about the design science research method, DSR, because most of the research question for the DSR is how to solve a problem. It's more to, as I know, is how to solve a problem with a better artifact. It's like better application or with a better hardware, something like that.
Yes.
So with the assumption is with that new artifact, it will be applied in the other situation, other context, because that's what common understanding or common concept from computer science people. I mean, this is a common question from us with the background of the computing system. We find the problem, and we trying to find in a literature review about the theory, and then you see that, look, we can develop the method better, then we develop the new method with the tools, and then we said that this is a better tools or better method compare with previous method. So we still wondering actually, because when we talk about qualitative, quantitative, where is actually the position of the design science research in your opinion? Is it?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I think when you start design science, you need to do qualitative, because you have to talk to people to understand the problem. You have to talk to people to understand what are the possibilities. When you start designing something, design might be quantitative, or it might be just different. You're designing an artifact. I don't think it's not qualitative or quantitative. It's building. It's different. When you collect data from people, does the new design work? That might be survey data. That might be quantitative, or it might be interviews. And maybe you don't do this, but I think it's useful if you're designing a new artifact for people. Just like when Rara Smaya is talking about new technique for measuring osteoporosis. But probably you should measure something to see if it works. Is it creating a better result? Are people happy with it? Are they satisfied? That could be survey as well. So for design science, I see three parts. The first part is diagnosing what is the problem. The second part is doing something about it, creating a solution. The third part is measuring, did it actually work? If you only design it, but you never measure anything, does it work, does it help, is it useful, then you never know. And if you design it without diagnosing anything, you can't be sure that your design is correct. Does this make sense or not?
Yeah. So when we talk about, from your explanation, so I think, the DSR is input of the qualitative quantitative, because it will collect the non-number data and also data, and also that often that we forget as a DSR researcher in Indonesia especially, they just develop the tool based on their hypothesis, based on the user requirement, and claim that it works, something like that, or they just test it in one group of people, then they said this is good. Maybe it will be different with if we test it in a different context, then we can find a limitation for our claim, for the solution.
So the UAT needs to be quite comprehensive.
And also, I think there's a difference between creating the project for, just solving problem or doing research. So when you're doing the design science, actually people from the design science also needs to learn about qualitative data gathering during their requirement elicitation. I think that's something that is quite missing, because they thought it was just asking question without validating, for example, and all the things that Robert mentioned earlier about how you really need to get into the core of asking questions and also formulating the answers. I think it's very important.
I mean, you might want to talk to doctors, you might want to talk to patients, you might want to talk to family members, you might want to talk to manufacturers, because they're going to be producing the new artifacts after the design is finished. There's lots of potential stakeholders. I think all of those stakeholders need to be involved in the diagnosis, and that's likely to be very qualitative. Maybe there's a survey in there as well. Maybe you can do qualitative and then survey, and then you do the design. But the design is based on a much more rigorous set of data analysis at the front, rather than simply, we had a good idea and here we go.
But Robert, those skill sets are very wide. Like if you're thinking in a project, you will have a business analyst, a system analyst, and then those that build this, develop the coding. But as a researcher, to master all of that, it's going to be.
It's not fair. I agree. It's not fair. Therefore, you need to have a team. And maybe some members of the team are only involved in the diagnosis, but they're not involved in later stages. And some members are only involved in the middle part, but they're not in the beginning. And so different people are doing different things at different times.
But how about the publication? What do you think about it?
Well, it depends. Maybe the publication only focuses on the design, or maybe the publication only focuses on the diagnosis, or maybe it does the whole thing. You may have multiple publications.
So I think it's another thing that we can also consider, Pak Tony, because, with the 6 months of doing the research and with the expectation of, doing it correctly, then maybe the scope of the research itself needs to be very focused, not, trying to be everything, but not doing it correctly, I think. For the students that is going to do design, because I can see that Pak Tony is thinking maybe these students need to do everything from the start to the end. So
that's hard. I mean, you could even split this across 2 years. And so in the first year, you do the diagnosis and it takes 6 months. And then in the second year, new students come in and they build on the diagnosis to build the artifact. And then in the third year, the artifact is evaluated by different students on a different project. And you have 3 groups of students in 3 separate years working on the same thing. But you spend more time to get it right.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a roadmap, I think, Pak Tony, of the research. So it doesn't have to be new every time. It can also build up from the previous research, I think.
And I would, for design science, I would recommend that, because it means that you can spend more time on each phase, and you don't just have to rush. If you rush, then you're going to make mistakes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. I agree. That's a good idea. Yeah.
Thank you. But telling me it's a good idea is very kind of you. Making it happen is much more difficult. And you know that very well.
Well, yes.
So, in all of the things I'm talking about, I can talk about methods, I can talk about how to do, but all of it is worth nothing unless you do it. You actually have to go and do these things. Otherwise, it's just talking, which will get forgotten.
So
I'm sorry, I'm being very direct here. But
no, that's fine. That's fine. That's what we are thinking. Like we want to apply the research method correctly. Like for example, the ASR. Currently, just a student develop the application and that's it. And then the lecturer test the application. But what I recommend is, okay, you need to test see to evaluate the application, whether it is solving the problem from as intention to develop the application or not. But yes, the dilemma is, look, we just have six months, and then okay, which one we choose? Whether we choose complete step, but it's very narrow level, or we running the thesis or final project with very correct method, correct data, but then we divide into more than one students, like a group of students. Then they will work as a team, but of course then the question is how one student can learn from the other part of the project. Like for example, one student just focus on the user requirement or finding the problem, for example. Then they maybe not learn from the other part, like how to develop the application or how to evaluate the application, because maybe they have finished, then have examination, and that's all, something like that. So it's
okay. So there are practical issues, sure. But I think with some imagination, it should be possible to create. I mean, maybe the students have ideas about how to do this. Maybe we should bring them into the conversation, because they are the ones who are going to do the work. It's not you and me. In the end, it's them. So maybe they should be part of this process.
Yeah.
Maybe they think it's totally unrealistic. Or maybe they like it. I mean, I don't know.
But we have a success story about that method. Is what is called a red blood project, ya Bu Mahia. Red blood project is a application and also system to attract Indonesian to what is called menyumbang darah, to donate the blood, something like that. And it's a big system. So it's starting from the problem analysis, develop the application, the system, not just the application, the system, and also evaluate and also adoption testing, something like that. And we have 5 students, at least 5 students, and 5 final project. We divided into 5 final project, and now it's becoming national level. It's a very good system.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
So at least we know that if we running the final project or thesis with more people, then the quality will be better.
Yeah, better. Yes, for sure.
Yeah, but the challenge is like that. The student who work in one part, then they maybe not has experience to do the other parts. Something like that. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, but maybe they also have different skills, because people with different skills will do different things. You can't ask everyone to have all the skills.
Okay. Makes sense.
Okay. Does anyone else have more questions, or are we done with questions?
Is Pak Tony the host now, or still Bu Raras?
Sudah sepertinya, Pak. Pak Tony saja yang menutup.
Enggak lah.
Maybe we're done.
Bapak saja yang terakhir. Saya sudah menyimpulkan yang separuh pertama tadi.
Okay. Well, I think maybe it's time to draw to a close. It's been great fun talking to you. Very much enjoyed these 2 seminars. And if there are more questions later, you can always send me or contact me, or we can organize another session or something else.
Okay, so Yep, guys, teman-teman, Bapak Ibu sekalian, thank you. Thank you for Prof. Robert Davison. It's really priceless time for Robert, for us that we have a Robert as a lecturer for two workshop, and I hope that teman-teman bisa mencatat. Is very important. There are many interesting points to remind us about how to work with our research. Firstly, for the first previous workshop, we have understand why we believe on the truth, whether we believe on one version or we believe that there are more than one version of the truth, and it will lead us to our decision in a research method. And today we have also learned about variety of the research methods and many highlight or important thing that we have to think and conduct when we run a research. Research. So we will see for another session. We still arrange for another workshop. We're trying to make another workshop special in design science research. But today we also have some interesting few insight about the design science research, and it is also good feedback for us ya, buat Bapak Ibu sekalian dengan background ilmu komputer, bahwa sebenarnya yang kita lakukan di design science research seperti teman-teman membuat aplikasi, membuat hardware, itu tidak bisa dipisahkan dari metode kualitatif maupun kuantitatif. Ya, jadi kalau kita mengatakan enggak, saya bukan kualitatif, salah juga Bapak Ibu, karena ternyata waktu user requirement analysis pada saat itu kita bertanya, kita mengumpulkan kebutuhan, pada saat itu Bapak Ibu melakukan qualitative method. Sayangnya karena kita tidak aware, kita tidak melakukan qualitative method, kita tidak mempelajari teknis-teknis pengumpulan data, prosedur pengumpulan data kualitatif yang benar, sampai dengan coding-coding, coding-coding bukan coding programming ya, coding-coding dari data-data kualitatif. Nah, ketika kemudian kita sudah membangun aplikasinya, kita menggunakan metode pengembangan aplikasi, kemudian di akhirnya kita mentesting. Nah, mentesting itu kita seringkali hanya menguji aplikasinya saja, fiturnya saja. Padahal di design science research harus ada namanya evaluation. In the SR, we should have a evaluation whether our artifact is really solving our intention, our problem, our goal of the research, or whether our artifact is better with previous artifact or not. Jadi ada evaluasi lagi harusnya seperti itu. Dan biasanya dalam evaluasi Bapak Ibu bisa juga melakukan kuantitatif dalam bentuk survei kepada pengguna. Sehingga ternyata yang selalu kita lakukan itu ternyata juga kualitatif juga kuantitatif. Gitu Bapak Ibu. So interesting for today, guys. Again, please give big appreciation and big applause to Prof. Robert Davison ya.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Robert. So hopefully we will see in Indonesia again. Everything will be better, and we will have a long and very nice discussion later if we can see not online.
Sure. Okay.
And, yep. So I think that, Pak Mujad, do you want to say something, Pak Mujad, to Prof?
Sudah cukup, Pak. Kita tunggu aja kalau nanti Pak Davison datang ke Indonesia, Pak. Kita ketemu lagi.
Excellent. We look forward to you to come to Indonesia. Hopefully Hong Kong will be better with any issues with the COVID, with everything. Indonesia now is getting, I don't know, because now we have another wave.
we have a new wave starting. There were suddenly 66 cases yesterday, so it got worse.
Yeah, the same. I want to say something nice, but the fact is there is another.
It's going to take time. We have to wait. You just look after yourselves. Be careful.
Yep.
Thank you.
And we'll talk to you later.
Okay. Yep.
All right.
Thank you so much. So dengan ini saya tutup ya. We will close this workshop. Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you,
Terima kasih teman-teman, Mbak Ibu sekalian.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam.
Where your dealings not for free. Say it's clear, but I can't see. Girl, you're giving what I need. Why you take it all? She's